Welcome to the explainer. All right, so take a look at this map. It seems pretty simple, right? But believe it or not, it's hiding a huge secret about how the United States is divided. And I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about an invisible line, a line that basically dictates where almost every American lives. So, that brings us to the big puzzle for today. Have you ever wondered why a whopping 80% of the entire US population lives to the east of this one single line? What is going on here? I mean, think about that for a second. It's a really stark division. You've got 80% of all Americans packed into the eastern half of the country. And that leaves only 20%, just a fifth of the population, scattered across all those vast, iconic landscapes we think of when we picture the American West. Okay, so now we're going to dig into that 20% out west. Because believe it or not, the story gets even more wild when you take a closer look. It's really not what you'd expect. You see, it turns out most of that 20% aren't really spread out at all. They're all clustered together, right along the Pacific coast. We're talking about states like California, Oregon, and Washington. That little coastal strip alone accounts for about 11% of the entire US population. So do the math. You take away those folks on the coast, and you're left with, get this, just 9% of Americans living in that gigantic interior region. We're talking about an area that covers almost half of the US mainland. It's kind of empty. To really wrap your head around that, let's put it in perspective. Imagine taking every single person living in New York City, all of them, and then just scattering them across an area that stretches all the way from the Dakotas down to Texas and over to Nevada. That's the level of emptiness we're really talking about here. So this begs a huge question, right? What on earth could cause such a massive, long-lasting imbalance? I mean, is it something from history? Is it about money and economics? Or is there something else going on entirely? Well, it turns out the main culprit isn't something that people built at all. It's something that was here long before us. We're talking about a feature of the Earth itself, something way more permanent than any city or state line. The main reason for this great American divide, it really all boils down to one single powerful word: geography. Plain and simple, the land itself is calling the shots on where people can actually live and thrive. And if we want to get even more specific, the main character in this story is that colossal wall we call the Rocky Mountains. I mean, this thing is a beast. This massive mountain range runs all the way from north to south, and it acts like a giant barrier that literally shapes everything that happens to the east of it. All right, so let's get into exactly how this mountain barrier shapes the continent's weather. It's all thanks to this really cool phenomenon called the rain shadow effect. Now, the rain shadow effect, that's the key to this whole puzzle. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's a process where mountains literally act like a giant umbrella, blocking rain from ever reaching the land on the other side. This creates a huge, dry shadow. Here's how it works, step by step. You've got all this moist air drifting in from the Pacific Ocean, heading east. But then, bam, it slams into the super tall Rocky Mountains. It has nowhere to go but up. As that air gets forced higher, it gets colder, and it's like squeezing a sponge. All that moisture gets squeezed out as rain and snow, but only on the western side. So by the time that air finally makes it over the top of the mountains, it's bone dry. And that's what creates that massive, arid shadow region in the middle of the country. So, you might be thinking, okay, but what about rain coming from the other direction? And that's a great question. Winds from the Gulf of Mexico do bring a ton of rain into the eastern half of the country. But here's the catch. Because of how the big continental wind patterns work, those winds just run out of steam. They can't push far enough west to break through that dry zone created by the Rockies' rain shadow. And that brings us to the final piece of our puzzle, the long-term consequences of all this. It's a really simple, fundamental story. A story about water, food, and people. It's really a clear chain reaction, like dominoes. First, the lack of rain creates these huge areas of dry land. Second, that dry land is just no good for the kind of big-time farming you need to feed a lot of people. And for most of human history, that's been the #1 factor in deciding where people settle down, where communities grow, and where cities get built. So when you look at it that way, that invisible line that splits the country, 80% on one side, 20 on the other, it's not random at all. In a lot of ways, the population map of the US is really just a map of where it rains, a line drawn not by people, but by the Rocky Mountains, millions and millions of years ago. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. We live in an age of amazing technology, incredible irrigation systems, remote work, not to mention a climate that's changing really fast. So, will this ancient line drawn by geography, will it always define where Americans live? Or just maybe, could our modern world finally be the thing that erases the rain shadow that has shaped this nation for so